The air crackled. Juniper felt it in her fingertips. A low hum resonated through the forest floor, vibrating up her legs. She crouched lower, her eyes scanning the undergrowth. Beside her, Bishop, her sleek black cat, mirrored her posture. His ears were pricked, his emerald eyes fixed on the path ahead.
"Just a little further, Bishop,"
she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. She clutched the worn leather satchel tighter. Inside lay rosemary, yarrow root, and a single raven's feather, ingredients for tonight's spells. Juniper wasn't a typical girl. She was a witch, learning to harness the ancient power that pulsed in her veins. Tonight was different. Tonight felt significant, charged with an energy she couldn't quite place. The forest, usually a source of comfort, seemed to hold its breath, anticipating something momentous. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised violet and blood orange, Juniper reached her destination, a crumbling stone well hidden deep within the woods. This was a place of power, a nexus where the veil between worlds thinned.
"Tonight we see what this magic truly is, Bishop,"
she murmured, her voice tinged with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. The air grew colder as they journeyed deeper into the woods. The familiar scent of pine and damp earth was replaced by something metallic, something ancient and unsettling. They finally emerged from the dense trees, the path opening onto a dirt road. A weather-beaten sign, barely clinging to its post, creaked in the breeze. It read, "Dead Women's Crossing."
"Dead Women's Crossing,"
Juniper echoed, her voice thin. The name hung in the air, heavy with unspoken stories and lingering sorrow. The town, shrouded in an unnatural stillness, seemed to observe their arrival with a watchful silence. Deserted houses stood like skeletal sentinels, their windows like vacant eyes. The only sound was the wind whistling through the gaps in the buildings, creating a mournful symphony. Even Bishop, usually fearless, pressed close to Juniper's side, his green eyes wide and wary.
"We need information, Bishop,"
Juniper murmured, her gaze drawn to a building at the far end of the main street. Its windows, though grimy, glowed with a faint, inviting light. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "Nancy's Library, where stories never die."
"A library,"
Juniper breathed. Where there were stories, there was knowledge, and knowledge she knew was power. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy oak door, the hinges groaning in protest. A bell chimed softly, announcing their arrival in the silent town. The air inside the library was thick with the smell of old paper and dust. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, crammed with volumes bound in leather and ancient cloth. A fire crackled cheerfully on the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced across the room. Behind a massive oak desk piled high with books sat a woman. Nancy, as the nameplate on the desk proclaimed, was unlike anyone Juniper had ever met. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her piercing blue eyes magnified by round spectacles perched on the bridge of her nose. She wore a long black dress that seemed to absorb the light, and a silver pendant in the shape of an open book glinted at her throat.
"Welcome, child. I've been expecting you."
"Expecting me? But how?"
Nancy smiled, a slow, knowing curve of her lips.
"This town, child," it whispers. "It told me of your coming, of the power you carry."
Her gaze, sharp and assessing, lingered on Juniper for a moment before shifting to Bishop, who sat at Juniper's heels, tail twitching nervously.
"And of the familiar that walks beside you."
Juniper swallowed, her throat suddenly dry.
"I need information about this town, about the magic here."
Nancy's smile widened.
"Ah, yes, the magic. This town is steeped in it, child, but be warned, it is a dangerous magic, a corrupted magic."
A low growl rumbled deep within Bishop's chest, the sound unlike anything Juniper had ever heard from him before. He arched his back, his fur standing on end as his body began to tremble. His emerald eyes, now glowing with an eerie inner light, fixed on something behind Juniper, something sinister.
"Juniper, behind you!"
Nancy's voice was sharp, urgent. Juniper whirled around, just as a grotesque figure lunged out of the shadows between the bookshelves. It was vaguely humanoid in shape, but its skin was a sickly green, stretched taut over bones that protruded at unnatural angles. Its eyes, mere pinpoints of red light, burned with a malevolent hunger. As the creature lunged, Bishop transformed. He grew, his lithe feline form expanding, muscles rippling beneath his sleek black coat. He was no longer a house cat, but a creature of the night, a panther, sleek and deadly. His growl became a roar, echoing through the library as he launched himself at the grotesque figure. Terror threatened to paralyze Juniper, but she forced herself to move. She had to help Bishop. As she reached for the silver pendant beneath her shirt, a gift from her grandmother, a source of her power, she felt a surge of energy course through her veins. The world around her blurred, the air shimmering with unseen power. Her vision cleared, and she was no longer a scared girl, but a conduit of ancient magic, a witch ready to fight. The library became a battlefield. Books tumbled from shelves as Bishop, a whirlwind of black fur and razor-sharp claws, battled the grotesque creature. It was a creature born of nightmare, its flesh rotting and stitched together, its movements jerky and unnatural.
A flesh goblin, whispered a voice in Juniper's mind. A servant of dark magic.
Juniper, her heart pounding against her ribs, unleashed a torrent of magic. It felt instinctive, primal, like a dam breaking within her. She directed her power, her hands glowing with an ethereal light, towards the flesh goblin. A bolt of energy shot from her fingertips, striking the creature in the chest and sending it reeling backward. Suddenly, a figure dropped from the rafters, landing with a thud between Juniper and the stunned flesh goblin. He was tall and lean, with closely cropped dark hair and eyes that glinted like obsidian in the dim light. He wore a worn leather jacket and jeans, and a silver sword gleamed in his hand.
Stay back, witchling. This one's mine.
Before Juniper could protest, the man lunged, his movements fluid and deadly. The silver sword flashed, leaving a trail of light in its wake, and the flesh goblin let out a high-pitched shriek as the blade cleaved through its grotesque form. It crumpled to the floor, its light extinguished, leaving a stench of decay hanging heavy in the air. The man, breathing heavily, turned to Juniper, his gaze wary.
You all right?
Juniper, still reeling from the adrenaline coursing through her veins, could only nod.
Who are you?
Name's Brent, and you've got yourself a hell of a right hook, witchling.
We need to work together.
Juniper insisted, her gaze flickering between Brent and Nancy, who watched them both with an unreadable expression.
If these flesh goblins are servants of the magic corrupting this town, we stand a better chance if we combine our strengths.
Brent leaned against a bookshelf, arms crossed, his skeptical gaze fixed on Juniper.
And why would I, a humble hunter, team up with a witch?
Bishop, his transformation receding, padded over to Juniper, rubbing against her leg in a gesture of reassurance. He might be back to his feline form, but his green eyes still held a spark of the panther's ferocity.
Because your paths, though different, have converged for a reason. This town, this magic, it doesn't discriminate between hunter and witch. You've been drawn into this web just as surely as she has.
She fixed her gaze on Brent. Brent hesitated, his gaze shifting between Juniper and Nancy. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the crackling of the fire and the soft thud of Bishop's tail against the wooden floor. Finally, Brent sighed, running a hand through his dark hair.
Fine, but I'm only doing this for the town, for the people trapped here.
Juniper nodded, a surge of gratitude washing over her. She didn't know what dangers awaited them in Dead Women's Crossing, but she felt a flicker of hope now that she wasn't alone. With Brent's combat skills, Bishop's otherworldly senses, and her own growing magical abilities, they might just stand a chance. There, Nancy said, pointing to a bookshelf tucked away in a shadowy alcove. It was crafted from dark wood, its shelves laden with tomes bound in leather and iron. Unlike the other books in the library, these seemed to pulsate with a faint inner light.
That is where you'll find what you seek.
Juniper approached the bookshelf cautiously, her fingers trailing over the spines of the ancient volumes. She could feel the power emanating from them, a raw, untamed energy that sent shivers down her spine. Her fingers brushed against a book bound in what felt like human skin. It was cold beneath her touch, and she recoiled instinctively.
Careful, those books hold ancient magic, knowledge passed down through generations of witches. But they are also repositories of dark secrets, of forbidden lore. Handle them with respect, child, or face the consequences.
Juniper nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She'd never encountered magic this potent before. She could feel its allure, its seductive whisper promising power beyond her wildest dreams. Taking a deep breath, she reached for a book bound in dark leather. Its cover was devoid of any markings, but as soon as her fingers touched it, the leather seemed to melt away, revealing a title etched in silver, The Witch's Grimoire. As Juniper opened the grimoire, its pages filled with swirling script and intricate diagrams, she felt a jolt of energy surge through her. It was as if the book itself was alive, its ancient knowledge flowing into her, unlocking secrets buried deep within her soul. She realized then that this book wasn't just a collection of spells and incantations, it was a guide, a map to navigate the vast and terrifying power she was only beginning to understand. The air crackled with anticipation as Juniper, Brent and Bishop crept through the deserted streets of Dead Women's Crossing. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to writhe and twist like living things. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the sound of their own footsteps and the distant howling of dogs, or perhaps something more sinister echoing from the depths of the woods.
They're here.
Bishop hissed, his ears flattened against his skull, his emerald eyes scanning the shadows. He had been restless and agitated all night, his senses on high alert. A low growl rumbled deep within Brent's chest. He gripped the silver sword tighter, his gaze sweeping the rooftops, his movements alert and predatory.
Show yourselves, you foul creatures!
He roared into the night. His challenge was met with an answering shriek, a chorus of grotesque sounds that sent chills down Juniper's spine. From the shadows they came, a horde of flesh goblins, their eyes burning with malevolent hunger, their decaying flesh stretched taut over gnashing teeth and grasping claws. They surged forward, a wave of putrid flesh and bone, eager to tear into anything that lived.
Now, Juniper!
Brent yelled, his voice barely audible above the snarls of the approaching creatures. Juniper closed her eyes, drawing upon the knowledge she had gleaned from the witch's grimoire. She could feel the magic thrumming within her, a raw, untamed power yearning to be unleashed. She opened her eyes and they blazed with an unearthly light. Raising her hands, she unleashed a torrent of fire, a blazing inferno that engulfed the street, driving back the creatures of darkness. Smoke filled the air, the stench of charred flesh, mingling with the lingering scent of decay. The remaining flesh goblins, their numbers decimated, had retreated back into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of smouldering corpses. Juniper, her heart pounding against her ribs, leaned against a lamppost, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had never felt such power, such raw, destructive energy coursing through her veins.
You did well, child.
Nancy's voice came from behind her, startling Juniper. The librarian, seemingly unfazed by the battle that had just raged around them, surveyed the scene with a grim satisfaction.
They'll be back, and they'll be angrier than ever. We need to end this, old woman. We need to find the source of this corruption, whatever it is, and put a stop to it before more people get hurt.
He looked at Nancy, his expression grim. Nancy nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the far end of the street where the shadows seemed to gather like conspirators.
Yes, the time has come to confront the source of this darkness, the spirit that haunts this town. She's waiting for you, child. She believes you hold the key to breaking her curse.
She turned to Juniper, her piercing blue eyes boring into hers. Juniper swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry. She knew what she had to do. The witch's grimoire had revealed the town's dark history, the tale of a powerful witch unjustly accused and burned at the stake. Her vengeful spirit, twisted and corrupted by her pain, now held Dead Women's Crossing in its grip.
I'm ready.
Juniper said, her voice trembling slightly but her resolve unwavering. She would face this spirit, this angry, tormented soul, and she would find a way to set it free, even if it meant confronting the darkest parts of her own magic. The fate of Dead Women's Crossing, and perhaps her own destiny, hung in the balance.